Today we decided to build me a mid-range gaming PC because at the moment I'm playing games and video editing on an old workstation desktop. We're going to be building a PC that handles 1080p gaming and light video editing. Where we live there is basically no shortage of PC parts. Let's jump right into the part list. For the CPU we went with a Ryzen 5 5600X. You may be thinking, why don't we go for Intel? Well, there's a simple answer. 12th gen motherboards are like twice the price and you only get a little bit more performance than AMD. Also, Intel's get so hot that it's best to buy an AIO cooler. For the graphics card, we picked up an RX 6600. As I previously mentioned, there is pretty much no shortage of PC parts where we live, so we got this 20% off. This was a huge sale. The GPU has got 8GB of GDDR6 memory. You may be wondering why didn't we go for a 3060. There is also a simple answer. 3060s are $200 American more than RX 6600 where we live, and some games the RX 6600 outperforms the 3060. For the motherboard, we went with an ASRock X570 Phantom Gaming 4 Wi-Fi ATX motherboard. We went for this one since it had Wi-Fi and it was cheaper than most B550 boards with Wi-Fi. For the RAM, we went with 16GB of Corsair Vengeance 3200MHz RAM. This is good RAM for mid-range PC builds. This RAM also comes in an RGB form. For the storage, we picked up two M.2s. We got a Samsung 980 250 gigs for our boot drive, and then we got a 1TB of Crucial P2 for our games and apps. We didn't need to get two drives, but we decided to get the 980 for faster boot speed. For the power supply, we went for an EVGA Supernova 750W 80 plus gold fully modular power supply. EVGA Supernova power supplies are one of my favourite power supplies out there. Finally, the case. We picked up the Deepcore 55 Matrix mesh case. This case has amazing airflow and it looks sick. This case comes with 4 RGB fans. The case also has an RGB fan controllable button, or you can plug the fans into the motherboard. All these parts we will link down in the description. We started off the build by opening the motherboard box. In the box we're greeted with something to do with the Wi-Fi, more things to do with the Wi-Fi, a back plate, and then the actual motherboard itself. So once we kind of wrestled it out of the box, because it was actually heavier than I expected, we set it down and we took it out of its cardboard and set it down on the motherboard box. Then what we did is we unpackaged it, as you do with most PC parts. That was so satisfying, just sliding it out of its package. Then we opened up the Ryzen 5's box by using a knife, of course, and cutting it open. In the box we had AMD's cooler, the 5th gen, the actual CPU itself, and a sticker which we will later stick on the PC. I showed everyone the pins. I was so nervous at this point. I knew if I screwed up here, that's $300 gone. I grabbed it, I was shaking so much, not gonna lie. Like actuals, if I dropped that, or if I somehow damaged the pins, that could be $300 gone. I remember he tried to tell me to stop shaking, but I just couldn't. We tried to line up the arrows, just to make sure. A couple times we checked. I dropped it in place, but it was about a mile off where it needed to go. I dropped it again, second time lucky, I got it. Next, what we were going to do is open up the cooler to see if it was AMD's quick install cooler. It turned out to not be the quick install cooler, so he had to unscrew the little bits on the motherboard which it would sit on. Then I pulled the cooler out of the box, and I was a bit worried because I was like, where was the thermal paste? But it turns out it was already on the cooler itself. Now remember, this is my first time building a PC, so don't judge me. We screwed it in, and as everyone knows, you gotta do it cross pattern. So we screwed in a bit, and this took quite a while actually to screw it in, because I was a bit worried that I'd snap the motherboard, whatnot. At this point I was feeling pretty confident since I just installed the CPU. And that's a very frightening task, especially if you screw up, it's all done and gone. We kept on screwing in the screws, and well, as I've previously mentioned, it took a while. Also, I peeled off the little peel off the motherboard. That was pretty satisfying, as they normally are. Now it's time to move on to the M.2s. As I said in the intro, we bought two M.2s, but we were debating whether we'd put the Samsung one or the Crucial one in the main slot, and we decided to put the Samsung one in the main slot since that would be booting our Windows. We pushed it in. He was showing me what to do since he had recently built a PC, but he's integrated graphics because, well, he kind of wanted something, he just wanted integrated graphics because of the big graphics card shortage. And also at that point graphics cards were ridiculous. I think in New Zealand dollars, which is around 1/3 more than American dollars. I think it was around 1,200 New Zealand dollars for a 3060 at that point. And he wanted to get a 3060, and he was just like, not happening. But yeah, so we'd installed the SSDs, of course I'd installed the second one, and then it was time to put the RAM in. We pushed. Again, I was frightened that I was going to snap the motherboard if I pushed too hard. And then we'd installed the RAM. Now it was time for us to move on to some other stuff. I mean, I did show the graphics card there, but trust me, we're not doing that yet. Same with the power supply. Now it's time for the big boy to come out, the case. This case I've been admiring for quite a few months now, actually. I've always liked the design of the mesh with the 3 RGB fans. And yeah, in my opinion, it looks pretty sick. So we were still debating which way it was until then we found out that it was sitting on its side. So the back was facing downwards. We'd pulled the plastic off, and then that's what the case looks like. We unscrewed the thumb screws, took the tempered glass off, And at this point we don't have a very good shot of the case because, well, we're sitting the camera on a tripod, and while we were mainly focused on getting it built and done. Yeah, so throughout the video if you see quite bad like camera angles, that'll be because it was sitting on a tripod. And this one didn't like track where you were moving either, so. We set the PC on its side. And then I decided to bring the camera a bit closer since we'd then be working on the PC. But we realised that we needed to do something else, install the Wi-Fi. And, well, it's one of those cheap versions of Wi-Fi.
One eternity later.
There we go.
Okay, we've finally done it. It literally took, I checked the recording, it took 28 minutes. Now we're moving on to the power supply unboxing. As I've mentioned earlier on, this is one of my favourite series of power supplies, the Supernova. I could have gone for a 650 watt, but it turns out that it was the same price because it was on sale. So yeah, we picked up the 750. In the box you've got the instruction manuals, most things. And then look at that. Oh, that's a nice power supply. And then we've got heaps of cables as well in there. Like so many. Look at that. Crazy. Then we worked out what cables we needed. Then we started plugging in a few cables that we needed to thread through, just because it's easier doing it now than installing the power supply and then having to plug them in. Then we slotted in the power supply, and it turns out that the hard drive cage was in the way, so we had to unscrew that and take them out. So, well, if I want to get a hard drive in the future, that's going to be an annoying task. Plugged in a few more cables. Then we threaded through the big 24-pin cable, since that would be needed to connect to the motherboard, and that is the thickest cable of them all. This actually took quite a while to try and fit the power supply in because of course the hard drive cage was very annoying. And on the case there were a few more cables than I expected, actually, to be honest. And we got the little screws out to screw the power supply in. And the good part about this case is that it's one that you can actually see the power supply. So yeah, because the Supernova does look pretty nice actually on the side. Then we plugged in the big 24-pin cable to the motherboard. I mean, later on if I wanted to, I could, we'll change them to like some RGB cables, because those do look pretty cool with LED software. But at the moment I'm kind of sticking at a budget, because I don't want every single cent that I make to go in the bin basically, and they're not necessary things. It's just like I could upgrade to an AIO just to make it look cooler, and also to keep the CPU cooler. Plugged a few more cables in, threaded them through, that sort of thing. Now at this point, we weren't really caring about cable management, and that came back to bite us, trust me, in the end. Just working out where all the cables need to go. Like that. Now it's time for the graphics card unboxing. I started pulling out the GPU and I was like super scared. I was like, oh no, what if it's the wrong way around? What if I drop the GPU? Getting so worried. And he just pulled it out. He was like, there's no problem. I thought that was a personal letter from ESI, but it turns out it wasn't. It was just had a few instructions in it. But still, cool envelope. I was admiring the plastic that I'd recently seen in the motherboard box. I pulled it out of the plastic. Oh, it looks so shiny. That was a super nice GPU, and especially the back plate. That looks pretty cool. Still admiring the back plate. It was so nice. And I really do like the MSI logo on it. That looks pretty cool. But it was super sad because I didn't get any MSI stickers, which was kind of unusual. We checked to make sure that was the right plug. It was. Now it's time for the best part, the GPU installation. This is the most satisfying part of building a PC, I can tell you that now. How good did that sound? Most satisfying noise building a PC. One of the most satisfying things. Of course, peeling the plastic off the glass is very satisfying. Now we had to work out how to screw this back in, and we'd, well, lost the screw. Which was extremely annoying, I can tell you that now. And look at how trash that cable management is. As I've said, it came back to bite us in the end. Plugged it into the GPU. Oh, and also, if you're wondering, if you're wondering why you didn't see us screwing in the motherboard, it turns out, well, we actually forgot to screw in the motherboard. And we forgot to film that part as well because it was such a, oh no, because we stood the case up, the motherboard fell down and made a noise, and we're like, oh no.
Oh, it booted! Let's go!
That was my reaction when it booted. It was hilarious. was so funny. Now I've cut out a bit of the booting since that takes a little bit of time because you gotta like go through the BIOS, set up Windows, things like that. Yeah. Well, it turned on, and as you know now, I've got an ASRock X570 motherboard, so, well, that's why it says ASRock. In case you didn't know, it's the motherboard in the BIOS. It's the motherboard's, like, BIOS, if you know what I mean. In case you're new to this, like I am. And wow, we had to stare at the big ugly ASRock for a long time, trust me. Now, the case fans weren't spinning. Now this was our own case problem since we didn't actually plug them in properly. So don't get alarmed if you're looking at buying this case. That was just us because we forgot to plug them in. And now we had to see if we had a Windows activation key, which we didn't get. And if you're wondering, I don't want to pay $200 for Windows. How can I get it cheaper? Get an OEM, okay? Now I would recommend the G2A code because that's what we used later on and it worked perfectly. And then we also updated the BIOS later on, which meant that we could run Windows 11. So yeah, I definitely recommend getting an OEM. The only problem with an OEM is that you can't then, if you build a new PC, you can't then like transfer it, has to stay on the motherboard. But I mean, for $40, it's a lot cheaper than paying $200, so definitely recommend getting an OEM. Now I had to wait for it to update.
One eternity later.
Finally, it finished updating, and that was a painful process. Now we're back to the BIOS. And well, Windows was loading up, and trust me, this was an annoying process, like very annoying. And I'll just blur this out because this is like our Wi-Fi in our country and things like that. And well, this was just doing the Wi-Fi things like that. Selecting region. And we had to see that ugly ASRock again. Honestly, this was probably, of the whole experience of building a PC, this is the most annoying part. We got into Windows, and it's the default Windows 10 background is that background. I remember the first time I ever got a Windows 10 laptop, that's what came up, and I thought that's pretty cool since I love swimming, in case you didn't know. But yeah. Oh, and if you can see the fans spinning crazy, I mean the RGB, that's just because we've sped the video up. It's not that they're broken or anything. Now we're on the BIOS, just updating a few things like the RAM, speed, things like that. Guys, wraps up today's video. Remember to like and subscribe for more content like this. See ya in the next video.